So what do you mean by psychology? So when you talk about the importance, the first one is it enhances psychological capacities, because sometimes the person in front of you will not express or tell directly or verbally something. Why am I feeling bad? What is the reason behind it? How could I trick my mind to feel better? But when you talk about growth is basically quantitative. Hello all, my name is Rohit. I take physical education on behalf of Prep School by Vidhyaashram. In today's class, we will cover psychology and sports. That means we will be studying about different concepts and aspects of psychology from the angle of sports. Having said that, let's start off with our first topic in the session, that is define psychology. So what do you mean by psychology? So psychology is the study of how our mind works, how our thought process works, how different people interpret and understand different things. So all those things comes under psychology. So what is psychology once again? It is basically a study. What is it? It is basically a study which determines the functionality and perspective and interpretation of different human beings and how do they think. So all that, the study of that and the processing of the mind, all those things will be coming under psychology. Now having said that, let's look into some of the importance of sports psychology. Why we need to have psychological studies and knowledge in sports. So when you talk about the importance, the first one is it enhances psychological capacities. That means when you have the proper knowledge of psychology, you know how the brain works. Based on that, you can trick or train your mind to perform or to make your mind work better or to help you to balance different kind of emotional disbalances. So that's one importance of psychology in sports. Next, it assists to learn motor skills. That means, like I said, psychology also helps you to deal with different kind of mobility related problems or mobility related developments. Third is it aids in understanding behavior. So if you know psychology, if you know what does a particular kind of body language means, then you will be able to assess a particular kind of person's behavior, or that way your relationship with that person will improve, because sometimes the person in front of you will not express or tell directly or verbally something. You will be able to understand that person based on that person's body behavior or body language. Okay, so that's another importance of psychology. Next, it helps in controlling emotions. Like I said, if you know about how your mind works, you can trick your mind to feel better even though the situations are not that good. So that's another benefit of psychology. Next, it prepares the athletes psychologically for competitions. That means different athletes have different kind of game related stress or sports pressure on the field. So all those things can be removed and controlled and balanced if a person or if an athlete knows about how the mind psychology works and how to control it. So that's the fifth importance of psychology in sports. Next, it supports the emotional need of a sports person. It's basically same when you talk about the fifth and sixth point. It's almost the same. Next is it supports emotional needs of a sports person. That means it helps the person to develop different kind of emotional balance. Next is it supports emotional need of a sports person. Like I said, it's almost the same. Here also it helps the sports person to understand the mind psychology, and if that person is feeling bad, why am I feeling bad? What is the reason behind it? How could I trick my mind to feel better? How could I trick my mind to forget that I have any kind of a sort of problem when I'm focusing or when I'm playing? So what happens is that if a person or sportsman is not able to balance his emotional disbalance, maybe something is wrong at his home or maybe something is wrong at different places. So if that sort of a problem is there in the subconscious of that person, it will always ping that person or nag that person on the field also when he's performing. So knowing about the psychology, it will help that person to balance his emotions. So these are some of the importance of knowing and understanding psychology in sports. Having said that, let's move forward to our next topic, that is define growth and development. So what do you mean by development and what do you mean by growth? Generally when you talk about as a layman, we use both the terms in different kind of situations. Sometimes for the same situation also we will use the same term. But you need to understand that there is a difference between both. When you talk about growth is more on a physical level. Development is more on a physical and overall level. That means your mental development, your social development, your health development, your physiological development, everything will come under development. But when you talk about growth is basically quantitative. That means how much higher that person became. What is his height? 3 years back he had this much height. Now after 3 years he has this much height. So that is more of a growth. When you talk about development, how much that person became mature. You cannot count or you cannot measure the maturity level of a person, but you can only understand the development in that. So more of a quality matter will come under development and more of a quantity matter will come under growth. So that you have to keep in mind. So in basic terms, Growth is what? Growth is a quantitative development in a person. So development is basically the overall growth in a person. Now you see how smartly I have used the growth term in development and development term in growth. You can use that. You can also use that in exam in a very smart way. Because when I'm talking about development, development on its own is not quantitative. But if you look into the different classification of development, development is also involved when it comes to physical development. There are also mental development. There are also IQ and problem solving development. So different developments are there at different levels. So since physical development and development is quantitative, you can still use the word growth inside the definition of development. So like that you can cross-reference and study and understand the term better. So in single sentence, if you put forth the statement again, growth is basically quantitative development. That means how much person has grown, the height of that. Next, development is basically the growth on overall basis. That could be a mental growth, that could be a physical growth, that could be your intellectual development or intellectual growth. So all those things will come under that. So I hope in depth you understood the dissection of the word growth and development and understood each element of that. Having said that, let's move forward with the next topic in today's session, that is the difference between growth and development. Now I have given a brief idea about the difference between both, but still let's get through each one of them one by one. Okay, first is growth can be measured but not development. Like I said, growth is quantitative, so obviously you can number it, you can put values to it and you can measure it, and development you cannot measure because it's more of a qualitative thing. Next you have growth is limited to age but not development. Like I said, there is a certain age till which you will grow. After that you will not have a growth. But development is lifelong. Means so if you are learning something new, lifelong you can learn something new and you can increase your knowledge. That means your brain capacity is increasing. So that could be increased and that could be developed over the period of time. So that has no stop to it. But when you talk about growth, that is limited. So when you talk about after certain age you won't grow. So that is there about that. Next you have development doesn't necessarily take place with growth. It may differ. Okay. So after certain age, when the development of the body stops, that's it. After that, the development will not be in sync with the growth, because growth will stop, but development will keep on growing. Okay. So that's what they are saying here. Development necessarily doesn't stay in sync with the growth. Next you have growth is related to only physical aspect, but development is related to all aspects. Like I said, when you talk about growth, it's only quantitative, the physical aspect. When you talk about development, it includes physical aspect also, but other aspects also are involved, like your intellectual ability, like your physical ability, your mental ability, everything will come under that. So that's the difference between your growth and development. So I hope you understood the difference. Having said that, let's move forward with our next topic, that is development at different stage of developments. You have infancy, childhood, adolescence. Okay, so three different categories are there. You have infancy, you have childhood, and then you have adolescence. So when we talk about infancy, when a child is born, what all sort of development you could see? You could see the development at a physical level, also at a qualitative level, that is the maturity, the thought process. The baby starts calling his mother's name, tries to talk, tries to produce sound from the vocal cords. So these are small, minute, micro level developments, movement of the hands, movement of the legs. So all those micro level movements you could see. So all those sort of small little movements you could observe at the infancy stage. Then comes the stage of childhood, where the child gets up and sits, starts walking, starts crawling, start talking new words. The library of vocabulary gets expanded in his mind. He tries to understand new things, he memorizes certain things, he imitates his parents, and lot of different kind of grasping strength. The intellectual ability increases in that stage. The intellectual development is more on that stage. So that is why many times you might have wondered, whatever you studied in your first standard, second standard till third or fourth standard, you remember more than what you studied last year. So whatever you studied in 10th standard, you may remember very less. But whatever you studied in your first standard or second standard, or maybe during your kindergarten, you remember that more. The reason is that at that time the grasping power is very sharp. That time whatever you pick up, your mind is full blank. Whatever you picked up at that stage of time, you picked up very fast and it stayed forever. Okay. But now since your mind is cluttered with a lot of things, sometimes you forget certain things because space is not there in the mind. So automatically certain memory gets replaced by another. So some memories are lost. But whatever you fed into your mind, during your childhood, it stays forever. So that's another fact that I wanted to share with you. Next you have adolescent stage. Adolescent stage, a lot of changes happens. You have physical changes to your body, then you have mental changes, the way you think, the mentality of that changes. Then you have emotional characteristics. That means a lot of emotional disbalances, mood swings, all those things, all those sort of problems comes. Then social characteristics, that means you get that introvert, extrovert kind of a thought, and different kind of social problems will also fall into place when you get adult. That means you start thinking too much. Now here's the funny thing, until you started thinking about what that person may think, what this person may think, until you started having that problem, you were all good. But the moment you started getting that thought in the mind, okay, if I tell that person this, that what that person will think, if I tell this person this, what this person will think, all this kind of cross questioning that you have in the mind, when you started thinking that, that's when your adolescence started. That's when all the problems started, because that stopped you from being you and being open to others and being whatever you want. Now when you're in adolescent stage, you are more conscious, you are restricting your activity and you are restricting your publicity, or whatever activity that you're doing, you're keeping it to yourself. You're not, you're thinking 1,100 times before you're doing anything. So all those kind of thoughts, social acceptance, rejections, the team members and the colleagues and different kind of activities and different kind of thought process will jump and come forth to your mind when you have the adolescent stage. Then after that you have motor characteristics. That means your mobility, your agility, that also has a change. So when you are grown up, when you become adult, your agility changes, okay, your mobility level, your sharpness, your endurance, your stamina, all those things also gets a hype up, or all those things also improves over the period of time. So all these different kind of departments, all these different kind of classification, in each one of these departments certain changes and growth and development is there. So all these changes are there under different stages of your development or at different stages of your growth. So you have three different categories, that is infancy, childhood and adolescence. We are not even going to the old age group, because generally we are studying about physical education and sports, because after certain age the physical requirement of games and sports could not be fulfilled. So we are not focusing much on the old age. We are talking more of a infancy, childhood and adolescent stage. Okay, so there is one more stage obviously which is called as old age or senior citizen age. What is the development, or what is the degradation of cell and regeneration? That's a different topic on different angle of study. Okay, so here we have only taken three categories because we are studying about the active group of people. That means the people who are involved in sports or any kind of physical fitness activities or daily active activity. Okay, so having said that, and hoping you understood the different categories and different kind of developments in each of these categories, let's move forward with our next topic, that is the meaning of adolescence. So what do you mean by adolescence? Adolescence is basically a stage in human being's life where you get a lot of physical, mental, social and psychological changes. Now having said that, let's move forward with our next topic, that is different sort of problems that you face when you hit the adolescence level or adolescent stage in your life. The first is physical problems. Obviously, new changes in the body takes place. It takes time for you to get adjusted to that. So that also becomes a problem at times to certain people. Next, you have mental problems. Like I said, a lot of different kind of mood swings, a lot of different kind of cross questioning to yourself and thought process. It just jumbles up your mind and you feel a little bit of emotional disbalance. So mental problems also are there. Then problems of aggressive behavior. Because of all these things, automatically the aggression level also increases. So because of all these problems, aggressive behavior also get introduced, because what happens due to physiological changes and physical changes and mental changes, lot of things are bugging up your mind and your dominance. And when you grow up, you have that sense of dominance among everybody. You feel that new introduction of manlyhood, you feel that growth, you feel that you are grown up now, you have the ability to control everything, you want everything under control, you don't want to listen to anybody, you want dominance. So all those sort of new thoughts and new things comes to your mind when you hit adolescence. Then after that you have lack of stability and adjustment, and because you are more arrogant and stabilized mind, what happens, it becomes a problematic situation for you to get adjusted to everybody else. You are not mature mentally enough to compromise or to listen to certain things. Sometimes you always are defensive by nature. So that also happens when you hit the adolescent stage. Next, emotional problems. Like I talked about earlier, you have emotional problems, you have mental problems, almost same, but certain small differences are there, but you can still put them under the same category. So different kind of emotional disbalance will be coming. Next, you have problem related to sex. Like I said, because of the physiological changes and mental changes, what happens, a lot of times the endocrine system also acts differently compared to what and how it used to act earlier. So because of that also, you have a lot of problems related to sex. Next is problems of self-support. That means you are not staying yourself, keeping yourself motivated. So self-support and self-motivational and self-confidence, all those sort of personality disbalance disbalance, all those things also happen when you hit adolescence. After that, you have feeling of importance. So the feeling of importance, you always want to be the center of attraction, you always want the spotlight on you, so you are attention seeker now. So when you grow, you are more dominant, you have that habit of taking everything under your dominance. So if that dominance is not given to you, you get aggressive, or if that attraction, or if that spotlight is not given to you, you get angry. So all those sort of problem happens again when you hit adolescence. Next, you have social problems. Like I said, now you face a lot of problems getting involved with society or to mingle up with them. So all those sort of problem happens when again you hit the adolescent stage. So these are the problems of adolescence. Okay, so when you hit the adolescent stage, all these problems comes to you. Now everybody won't have all these problems. This is not applicable or compulsory or mandatory change in everybody. This is general categorization. That means some people will have a dominant towards certain category more. Means some people will have more physical problems. Some people will have more mental problems. Some people will have lack of mental stability or emotional stability. So depending on person to person, all these things will change. So what I'm trying to say is everybody won't have all of these problems. Some people will have some set of problems. Some people will have some set of problems, and other people will have other set of some problems. So these were some of the problem of adolescent. So I hope you understood this topic. Having said that, let's move forward with our next topic, that is the management of problem. How do you manage such problem? First way is education for motor development. Now proper motor development education has to be given. Like I said, there are a lot of physical changes that happens to the body. According to that, certain training, certain development to motor development, certain training and certain information and education has to be given to students or to children who are hitting that stage and having a problem. Next, education of psychology. That means how to manage your mental situation, how to manage your emotional disbalance. All those sort of things could be treated, or all those things could be taught to students to deal with stress and to deal with different kind of pressure. So that is one another thing. Next is sex education. Like I said, a lot of physical changes happens on the body. Because of that, our endocrine system also goes through a lot of changes, which in turn releases different kind of chemicals and different kind of chemical actions that changes the way we think, and that introduces a lot of sex related problems that has to be taught to students and made aware to students so that they don't face any kind of problems. That is one another fact. Next is vocational guidance. That means students are all confused at this age. At adolescent stage, students or kids or sportsperson or anybody or athlete, whomever is involved, they have a hard time picking up what they want to do in life, what is their goal. So proper vocational guidance has to be given by the counselor or by the teacher so they can lead a better life, or they can take a better path to whichever goal they want to go. Next is moral and religious education. More on a moral basis, because your moral values, your cultural values, all those important social values has to be developed in you, so you stay more mature and you act better in the society and in the public. So that also has to be taught. So moral values and different kind of cultural values has to be taught. Next, to provide suitable environment. Proper environment has to be given to whomever we are talking about, whether we are talking about a student who is adolescent or whether we are talking about a sportsman who has just reached the stage of adolescence. Proper environment has to be given, because environment itself many times inspires people to do different things. So that also is one major important thing. Next is adequate independence. Like I said, at the age of adolescence, at the stage of adolescence, people are more dominant. People or students or children start thinking that they are grown up now, nobody has to teach them anything, nobody has to tell them anything. So that sort of a dominant thought comes to their mind, and that kind of a feeling that comes to the mind. So to avoid any kind of clash, to make it all smooth for them, sometimes you need to give a little space to them, sometimes you need to give a little bit of independence to them, so that many times even the adolescent at that point of time, the kid itself gets to know and learns from the experience that he gets from the adolescent stage. Sometimes you need to give a space in such situations. So that's one another factor. Next is social education. Now importance of social education is very important, because the adolescent have a lot of issue dealing with different kind of social. People feel weird talking to other people, they are no more open to other. When we were kids, we used to run around people and we used to say hi to anybody, we used to talk to anybody, and we used to get involved with anybody. But as you grow up, you start sorting out people. That means you start filtering. Okay, should you talk to that person? Shouldn't you talk to that person? What is the reason? What is not the reason? So multiple thought. Before you actually start a conversation, you have a million thoughts in your mind. So that important thing, the important factor of social development, the social involvement, you have to be a human being. We are a social being, right? So it's important for you to get involved socially, talk to others, meet new people, talk to them. Don't have that weird kind of a thought in the mind or weird kind of a feeling when you're talking to somebody somebody. It's quite natural, it's normal. But at the initial stage of adolescence, people all get these kind of problems. So proper social education also has to be given to students or people who are just hit the adolescent to perform better or to have a better life, okay, or to deal with such adolescent problems. So these were some of the solutions or some of the way how you could manage the problem of adolescent, okay. So I hope you understood all these concepts. So I hope you understood all the concepts that we studied in this chapter pretty clear. If you look at from a layman's perspective, a lot of these things are very common and very natural. We know all these things, but when you study it as a subject, when you study it as a professional subject, it is important for you to formalize certain thing and understand the keywords. In exam, if you don't study this chapter and go, okay, this is a very general chapter, we could write on your own. If you go and write in the exam, the person who is checking the paper also will have that feeling, okay, this person haven't studied it. This person is writing just as a layman. So anybody who is walking around the road, if you give the question paper, you could write that answer. That kind of sort of answer are not what they are expecting there. They are expecting the key terms. Okay, they are expecting the key important formal terms. Just like I gave you the definition from different authors. So when somebody is asking define motivation or define personality, or somebody is asking define aggression, all those different kind of statements, they want it according to XYZ person. This is what he has stated. So if you write that means you're proving the examiner that you have studied this chapter. Exactly like that, certain management problems that we studied, the certain difference between growth and development that we studied, all those formal statement and keywords should be there in your answer in order for you to get good marks. Now if you write generally, I'm not saying you will get 0 marks in it. Obviously you'll get 1 or 1.5 marks out of 5, but that's not the way you should attend the paper, and that's not what we are aiming. We are aiming for best results possible. For that you have to study technically about these things, okay. So I hope you understood all the topics clearly and hope you understood everything crystal clearly. Having said that, I'll take an off from here. I'll see you next time. Until then, this is me Rohit signing out until next time. Goodbye.